So I want you to just picture something for a second. You are walking deep, and I mean really deep, in the Brazilian forest.
Oh, man, yeah. The absolute middle of nowhere.
Exactly. And the canopy above you is so thick, so interwoven with centuries of growth that the sunlight only manages to, punch through in these tiny dusty beams.
Right, and the air out there is just incredibly heavy. It's the kind of humidity that you can practically wear.
Yeah, it literally weighs down your lungs, and the ground beneath your boots is this soft, damp earth. You're navigating through the thick brush, tracking an animal, reading the snapped twigs and all the disturbed leaves.
It's just in standard hunting stuff.
Right. But then you look down. Pressed perfectly into the mud, miles away from literally any village or trail, is a set of small footprints.
And the script describes them as looking like the footprints of a child, right?
Yeah.
Barefoot, delicate.
Yeah, exactly. And your immediate human instinct just kicks in. You think someone is lost out here.
Because a child wandering in the most hostile environment imaginable is just, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is. So naturally, you have to follow these tracks and help. But as you push deeper into the foliage, tracking the heel strikes and the toe indentations, this sudden, chilling realization washes over you.
This is the part that just gets under my skin.
Right. The tracks aren't leading you toward the child, you're following them perfectly. But based on the mechanics of a human stride, the creature making these tracks is actually walking in the opposite direction.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You aren't following it at all. You are walking straight into its jaws.
It is just the ultimate reversal of the predator-prey dynamic,
Totally.
You think your apex tracking skills are closing the distance to a target, but in reality, your own logic is just reeling you in like a fish.
So today we are doing a deep dive into an incredibly chilling horror script that details the legend of the Curupira.
Right, the mythical protector of the Brazilian forest.
Yes. Our mission today is to mine this fascinating folklore, to figure out what this creature represents, and how it weaponizes humanity's most primal fear of the deep woods.
And I think it's important to say this goes far beyond just a standard monster story.
Oh, absolutely.
The text lays out this masterclass in psychological terror. It all operates on the premise of one very specific quote from the source material, which is, "Protection does not mean mercy."
Ooh, protection does not mean mercy. That is such a heavy line.
It really is. And I think that distinction strips away the sort of romanticized lens we usually apply to nature spirits.
What do you mean by romanticize? Like the peaceful tree hugger vibe?
Yeah, exactly. Modern storytelling often paints forest guardians as these benevolent, peaceful entities, like dryads or tree spirits that just want harmony and balance.
Right, the kind of spirits that just want you to recycle.
Exactly. But the Curupira represents an older, much more unforgiving reality of the wild. Indigenous tribes and early explorers feared it deeply.
Because it enforces the law of the forest with absolute, ruthless prejudice.
Exactly. It doesn't care about a hunter's intentions.
Yeah.
If you disrespect its domain, the environment itself basically becomes your executioner.
Which is terrifying. So to understand why the deep forest is so scary, we really have to look at the anatomy of this nightmare.
The physical descriptions alone are a lot to unpack.
They really are. The physical descriptions in the script are wild, starting with that initial illusion. The text says it looks small, almost like a child, which immediately triggers what we call the uncanny valley effect.
Right, the uncanny valley. Because the human brain is highly attuned to recognizing other humans.
Yeah.
So when we see something that is almost human but just slightly off, it doesn't trigger empathy. It triggers a profound evolutionary revulsion.
It's like an alarm bell going off in your head.
Exactly. A child in the deep jungle, where a child could literally never survive on its own, signals to the primitive part of our brain that we are looking at a predator using mimicry.
It is basically a biological lure.
Yep.
And the lore says it has bright red hair, but the descriptions from the surviving hunters in the text, well, they vary wildly beyond that.
They really do. There's so much contradiction in the accounts.
Right. Like, some accounts swear the creature is completely bald. Others claim its entire body is covered in coarse hair.
And some hunters reported having jagged green teeth.
And eyes that literally glow in the dark. But, I mean, doesn't the fact that everyone describes it differently just mean the lore is unreliable?
That's a super common assumption, yeah.
Like, if it's bald in one village and hairy in the next, it just sounds like people are making up ghost stories to keep kids out of the woods, Why should we take these descriptions seriously at all?
Well, the inconsistency is actually the fingerprint of genuine trauma.
Wait, really? How so?
Consider the context of these encounters. No one is sitting down and studying the Curupira under laboratory lighting.
Right. fair point. You're probably running for your life.
Exactly. If you are seeing this entity, you are in the dark, paralyzed by an adrenaline overdose, and likely fleeing.
So your brain isn't exactly taking perfect notes.
Right. The human brain, when subjected to that level of primal panic, just stops recording continuous, high-definition memory. It enters survival mode.
So it's just grabbing whatever data it can.
Exactly. It records fragmented data points. Yep. A flash of glowing eyes in the brush, or the glint of green teeth in the moonlight.
Wow.
The superficial details scramble because the witness's cognitive processing is completely breaking down.
So the baldness, the hair, the teeth, those are just the variables of human terror filling in the blanks.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
But there is one absolute constant in every single story across generations.
Yeah, a mechanical detail that never changes.
The backward-facing feet.
Yes, its heels face forward and its toes point behind it.
Which is just such a creepy visual.
It really is. When I read this, my mind immediately went to the concept of a biological decoy.
A biological decoy, I like that phrasing.
Right, because it's an evolutionary design specifically meant to weaponize human intelligence against the human.
Totally. If we look at the neurological reality of why humans dominate the planet, our evolutionary success is deeply tied to our ability to track.
We are the ultimate trackers.
Right. Early humans survived by persistence hunting. We learned to read the environment like a map.
Which is pretty incredible when you think about it.
It is. Our visual cortex is literally wired to look at an indentation in the mud, recognize a heel strike and a toe off, and instantly extrapolate the direction, speed, and distance of our prey.
We use our logic to master our surroundings.
But the Curupira's anatomy takes that fundamental human neurological advantage and just short-circuits it completely.
Because when you look at the tracks, your brain automatically calculates the vector.
It does the math without you even trying.
Right. Your brain says, okay, the toes are pointing north, so the creature walked north.
And you calculate that you are safely behind it, or that you can maybe observe it from a safe distance.
But tracking it is a fatal miscalculation.
Exactly. Every single step you take following the logical direction of those tracks isn't putting distance between you and the threat.
It's erasing the distance.
Yes. You think it's fleeing, but it's actually closing in on you.
You enter the forest assuming you are the apex predator. You rely on your tracking skills, and the forest just uses your own expertise as bait.
It's a brutal realization.
It really is. But let's say you're a seasoned hunter. You spot the tracks, you realize the toes are backward, and you understand the trap.
You're smart enough to catch on.
Right. You decide to just turn around and walk away. But physical evasion is completely useless according to the script.
Oh, yeah. You can't just walk away.
Because the Curupira doesn't just hunt your body, it systematically dismantles your mind.
It is a psychological predator, first and foremost.
And it has a very specific target audience, right?
It does. The text notes that it specifically targets those who enter the forest to cut trees or kill animals. Basically, anyone attempting to impose human will on the wild.
It takes that personally.
Very. The punishment it inflicts is meticulously tailored to break the human spirit before any physical harm even occurs.
And the attack doesn't start with claws or teeth. It begins with sound.
A whistle.
Yes. The script describes a high-pitched, constant whistle echoing through the dense canopy. It circles the victim, sounding incredibly close, and then suddenly shifting to sound miles away.
And it's so disorienting.
The source notes that hunters would often follow the whistle, convincing themselves it was actually another person, like maybe a lost member of their own hunting party.
Which is such a tragic mistake. But it makes sense because humans are intensely social creatures.
We want to find other people.
Exactly. And when we are isolated in a massive sensory-depriving environment like the deep jungle, we become desperate for an anchor.
A familiar sound.
Right. A whistle implies human lung capacity. It implies intent. It offers this lifeline of connection.
But the moment a hunter steps off the path to follow that sound, the trap just springs shut.
That is the turning point.
Wait, so it doesn't just physically ambush you, it basically turns the forest into a massive, inescapable escape room with absolutely no clues.
That is a perfect way to put it.
The script details how paths just disappear. Familiar landmarks vanish. A hunter will walk for hours, desperate to find their way out, only to realize they are staring at the exact same tree they passed an hour ago.
They are walking in endless circles.
It's pure psychological torture, letting the victim wander until utter panic sets in.
And if we examine the reality of getting lost in dense foliage, this folklore is a perfect mirror for actual neurological breakdown.
Really? Like the literal science of getting lost?
Yes, the Curupira is basically the mythological personification of spatial disorientation.
Oh, wow.
In a deep rainforest, the canopy blocks out the sun, completely removing your primary celestial anchor.
So you can't use the sun to figure out east or west.
Right. And the underbrush limits your line of sight to just a few yards. So your human vestibular system, that's our inner ear balance and spatial awareness, it heavily relies on visual landmarks to keep us moving in a straight line.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Without those visual landmarks, our natural gait is unbalanced. Naturally causes us to walk in massive circles.
That is so creepy. So the shifting landmarks and the whistling that comes from everywhere and nowhere, they aren't just supernatural set dressing.
Not at all. They map perfectly onto the delirium of being hopelessly lost.
Right.
When your mental map fails, the brain frantically tries to pattern match. Every single tree starts to look identical.
And the silence of the deep woods is deafening, making every echo sound deliberate.
Exactly. The text explicitly states that Curupira avoids cities and noise. It reigns over this silent domain.
It literally owns the silence.
And when humans enter, it doesn't need brute force. It simply weaponizes their own sensory deprivation against them, letting the forest swallow them as exhaustion just takes over.
Which begs the obvious question for anyone listening. If this creature exerts total control over the environment, actively warping reality to trap intruders in an endless loop, how did anyone ever survive to document these stories?
People are resourceful, right?
They really are. Humans will always try to engineer a workaround for the uncontrollable, and the source material details these desperate countertactics people developed.
They basically attempt to negotiate a treaty with the wilderness.
Yeah. The script describes preventative measures. Hunters would leave offerings at the edge of the trees before ever stepping foot inside.
To kind of pay the toll.
Exactly. Specifically, the text mentions tobacco and cachaça, which is a really strong Brazilian sugarcane liquor.
Right, small gifts.
They leave these gifts at the boundary, hoping the Curupira will accept them and grant a temporary visa for safe passage.
But notice the specific nature of those offerings.
What do you mean? Like, why alcohol and tobacco instead of, say, meat or fruit?
Because tobacco and distilled alcohol are not happening naturally in the forest in those forms.
Oh, true.
They are highly refined, uniquely human creations. They represent human agriculture and human vice.
I never thought of it that way.
By leaving them at the threshold of the woods, the humans are effectively paying a tariff. They are acknowledging the Curupira's absolute sovereignty over the domain they are about to enter.
Offering the fruits of civilization to appease the guardian of the wild. But the script makes it super clear that the tariff isn't always accepted. Sometimes the offerings are just ignored and the Curupira still comes for you.
It's not a guaranteed contract.
Not at all. And if you find yourself trapped, listening to that impossible whistle, realizing you are walking in circles, there is one final, desperate escape method.
This part is so fascinating.
It is. And reading this part of the source material was honestly wild, because on its face, it sounds completely absurd.
You're talking about the vine.
The vine. The lore dictates that if you are trapped, you must find a vine and tie a knot in it.
Just a simple knot.
Yes. And supposedly, the Curupira will stop its hunt, become completely overcome with curiosity, and sit down to untie the knot.
Giving you a window to run.
Right. This gives the hunter the few precious minutes they need to break the loop and escape. But I really struggled to wrap my head around this at first.
It sounds a little silly, right?
Yeah. We are talking about an apex supernatural predator, a creature that distorts reality and weaponizes human psychology, and it is thwarted by the equivalent of a tangled shoelace.
It definitely feels like an anticlimax if you only look at it literally.
Right.
But if you analyze the ecological philosophy embedded in the myth, it is a profound statement about the rules of this specific universe.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The knot isn't a puzzle toy distracting a monster. It is an assertion of a deeper law.
How does tying a knot assert a law?
Think about the fundamental nature of an untouched forest. It operates on a chaotic yet perfectly balanced system of thermodynamics and biology.
Everything has its place.
Exactly. Vines seek light, water flows to the lowest point, decomposition feeds new growth. Everything follows the path of natural flow.
Okay, I'm tracking.
The Curupira is not just a monster living in the forest. It is the physical manifestation of that natural flow. It is essentially the immune system of the woods.
Oh, wow. It's a perfectly functioning, closed-loop ecosystem.
Exactly. Now think about a deliberately tied knot. It does not exist in nature.
Vines don't tie themselves in knots.
Right. A knot is a manipulation of organic material. It forces a vine against its natural growth pattern just to serve a human purpose.
It is the ultimate symbol of human interference.
Yes, it's an imposition of human order onto the natural chaos of the jungle.
So tying the knot is essentially introducing a foreign line of code into an otherwise flawless ecosystem.
You got it. And that triggers the forest's autoimmune response.
The Curupira.
Yes, when the Curupira encounters the knot, it isn't distracted, it is compelled.
It literally cannot ignore it.
Exactly. Encountering a disruption in its perfect domain forces the creature to act. Its entire purpose for existing is to eradicate human interference.
So it must untie the knot to restore the vine to its natural state.
Right. The hunter survives only because the guardian prioritizes cleaning up the human anomaly over killing the human who made it.
That is an incredibly clever mythological loophole.
Isn't it?
The lore is essentially saying that you cannot outmuscle the wilderness, and you certainly cannot outrun it.
Not a chance.
But if you deeply understand the uncompromising rules of the environment, you might be able to use its own rigid nature against it to buy yourself a head start.
The people who formulated this lore understood their environment perfectly.
They really did.
The survival rules laid out in the text serve as a chilling psychological manual for navigating the boundary between civilization and the wild.
Well, let's review those survival rules from the text for you guys listening, because they summarize the psychological terror perfectly.
Yeah, let's do it.
Rule number 1, if you hear a whistle behind you, do not answer.
Because answering breaks your isolation.
You give yourself away.
Exactly. It confirms your presence, proving that you have taken the bait and engaged with the illusion.
Rule number 2, if you find footprints that seem to walk in the wrong direction, do not follow them.
They are the biological decoy.
Right. The moment you trust your human logic over your primal instinct, you become the prey.
And rule number 3, which is arguably the most terrifying.
If the forest suddenly becomes entirely too quiet, you're already in its territory.
Total silence in a rainforest means the natural wildlife. The birds, the insects, the prey animals, they've either fled or frozen in place.
It's the calm before the storm.
The silence is the perimeter. It means the apex predator has officially arrived.
It perfectly encapsulates the terror of stepping out of the light of the structured human world and into a space where human rules are not just ignored, but actively used against you.
It really does. And it forces a compelling thought about the future of this myth, too. One that the source material actually indirectly sets up.
What's that?
Well, the text emphasizes that the Curupira lives deep in the dense, silent forest. Right. It avoids cities and human noise entirely.
Right, it needs that isolation.
It requires that vast, untouched expanse to exist.
But the reality of the Amazon and the deep Brazilian forests right now is relentless human expansion.
Deforestation is happening at a massive scale.
The dense canopy is being fractured every single day.
The untouched woods are shrinking daily. The boundary between the city and the deep forest is collapsing.
Oh man, I see where you're going with this.
The question that really lingers outside the text is, what happens to a guardian of the deep woods when the deep woods cease to exist?
Does the Curupira quietly fade into myth as its habitat is dismantled?
Or, like a cornered apex predator with nowhere left to hide, does the protector eventually turn its attention outward?
Wow.
If the deep forest is destroyed, does the Curupira bring the horror of the woods right to the edge of the concrete?
That is a terrifying application of the lore.
It really makes you think about our relationship with nature.
Absolutely. When human interference becomes total, the autoimmune response of the forest might not stop at a knot in a vine.
Definitely not.
So the next time you find yourself off the pavement, wandering a little further into the trees than you intended, pay attention to the silence.
Listen to the woods.
And if you look down into the mud and spot a delicate set of tracks, check the toes.
Just to be safe.
And whatever you do, do not follow them.